Hello, and welcome to Antioch's Calling. This is a trip report for 2019 to Uganda. So, the first question you may want to know is what is Antioch's Calling? We are in a non denominational parachurch ministry. We're a 501c3 registered in the state of New Mexico. We're primarily a grant making organization, and we support indigenous charities that are in the developing countries. So the idea is that we collect funds from Christians in the United States, and then we have partner ministries that we work with right now. This is primarily northern Uganda. And we ask the Ugandan churches, what is it that you need? And they'll tell us, and then our board will vote on it and determine, does this meet the requirements of our charter? Is this something that we want to support? We might come back with a counter proposal. But in general, our ministries are in sync enough that usually if they want something, it's worth funding for the most part, but we're not required to fund it. We don't have any paid staff. We're all volunteers, which significantly increases our fiscal efficiency. Currently, at least up to this point, the board has paid for the registration fees in the state of New Mexico and so forth. And my office is my bedroom. So we have almost no overhead whatsoever, which means that 100% of funds that are given to the organization from people that are not members of the board, they go straight to the African charities. I cover the expenses whenever I travel to Africa so that the donors don't have to pay for that. So after we have voted on the proposal, if we agree to it, then we wire funds to our partner ministry. They then perform all the work. This is very good for the local people because it gives them a job. It helps them to pay for it helps them take care of their families, and they are very fiscally efficient. It's much more efficient to hire the local people to do this type of construction than it would be to send Americans to East Africa. They then itemize the expenses, they collect the receipts, and they send them to us. And I go over to Uganda every couple of years and inspect the projects for accountability. So we have primarily three different partner ministries in northern Uganda. They do have interlocking directorates, so they're very closely related. The first is Divine Waters Uganda. They're primarily a well drilling ministry, although they have also been involved in health and hygiene. So they provide clean water to a huge number of people, tens of thousands in northern Uganda. Then there's Divine Waters Ministries. They have over 40 churches, and they're led by Bishop David, who is in Kitkum, Uganda. And then there's Legacy Primary School that we have partnered with, and we're working towards being a self-sufficient Christian community with a focus on education. And my primary contact is Pastor Ochendeleo. In Uganda, they put the last name first, and we put whereas Americans put the last name last. Anyway, Achin is the family name, DeLeo's the personal name. This is Pastor DeLeo and his wife Margaret and some of their children. So the trip started with me flying into Entebbe. This is right on Lake Victoria, and I went to a number of locations. We drove north up to Kuruma right after flying into Entebbe. This is a small village. It's just south of the Nile River, and I was interested in meeting with people from Restoration Gateway there. We have not partnered with them in the past, but I found their work very interesting, and I wanted to at least touch base and visit with them. And after that, then we drove to Lira. This is where the school is located, and also the primary church that we work with is one of the. There are several churches actually in Lyra, 3 churches in Lyra that we work with. And so I spoke at one of the churches for several days, and then drove up to Kitkum. And at Kitkum, there was a national conference for the denomination that we work with. It was approximately 40 churches coming together. Some were from South Sudan. And we also had Divine Waters also consecrated um, Bishop David as the bishop over the organization. Then we drove back down to Lyra, and I conducted some accountability on the school, spoke in another church, which is outside of Lyra, and then went home through the eastern route and flew out of Entebbe. So Restoration Gateway is a very interesting organization. They own several hundred acres. They have a church, primary and secondary school. They have about 180 children, I think, that are orphans. They're really orphans. They don't have parents. They have a functioning farm that feeds the children, 180-bed hospital, dental center, and then home for the children, of course. And so it's really impressive. We were interested in just this concept of, okay, what are all the elements that you need to make this kind of thing work? They have a couple of doctors that are from Texas primarily that I had the privilege of speaking with, really wonderful people. We asked questions about their farming techniques. They basically use Ugandan farming techniques. It's possible that maybe some of our children, we have about 230, could be treated at their facility if we made certain to help them, assist them with the cost of the treatment. And I wanted to talk to them about how they handle malaria. And then Pastor DeLeo explained an interesting way that he motivates some of the African people, which is you can join the soccer team if you dig a pit toilet in your backyard. And so they found that very interesting. So after that, then we went to Lyra, and this is the church that we've been funding. We fund, I'm just guessing, approximately half of it, and the Africans have funded the other half. They start using facilities as soon as they are constructed. As soon as there's a roof over it, even sometimes when there's not a roof over it, but they have a roof over this one, and so they're using it currently. And they unfortunately, though, you can tell they don't have. There's going to be a balcony here. The walls are not up. There are major portions of the church that are not completed. There's no running water, and the electricity, they can only get electricity by running a extension cord into another building. So we have some more work to do on the Adele Church. However, I was very pleased with the progress that they have made with the grant that we sent them some years ago. And then this is the inside of the Adele Church. This is what it looks like from the balcony. They allowed me to present twice, and I'm not as much of a evangelist as I am a teacher. So I prefer more of an analytical approach to the scriptures. And so in this particular presentation, I presented arguments as to why Jesus was the Passover lamb, both from the New Testament and the Old Testament. Explained how the blood on the door in Egypt was the same as the blood on our hearts. The safety under the blood in Egypt is the safety under the blood of Jesus. That the Last Supper was actually a Passover dinner, and that the Lord's Supper was instituted during that Passover. And so it's very, very, the Passover and the crucifixion are extremely closely linked, and that unleavened bread is a type for removal of sin for our lives or repentance. And they seem quite interested in the presentation. On the third day, we relived the Last Supper. What we did is go through a Messianic Passover, which is basically what Jesus did. And in modern Jews, modern Passovers, you have 4 cups of wine. They may have had 2 in the first century, but we used 4. And so we went through some of the traditions of the Passover, but more importantly, for each of the cups of wine, I read the words that Jesus spoke at that Passover, at that Last Supper, right before he died. So for the first cup of sanctification, I read what he said about how we should serve one another, and the deacons washed everyone's feet, including mine. For the second cup, on the judgment, I read what the Lord said regarding Judas and the Holy Spirit. For the third cup of redemption, I read that he instituted the Lord's Supper. We took the Lord's Supper just as the apostles did at that point, and about his commandments to abide in the vine. And for the fourth cup, that's the cup of the kingdom, and I read what he had to say about his second coming. After the Passover ceremony, then the next day we traveled to the National Divine Waters Conference in Kitkum, and I was very honored to be an invited speaker there. This is where all of the 40 churches or so gather together, and they have for 2 days, all day you have a series of speakers and praise and worship. The more importantly, though, I was able to assist Divine Waters Uganda with downloading some files from Faith Comes by Hearing. They're a ministry also out of New Mexico that provides audio Bibles in multiple languages. They're an absolutely fantastic ministry. So I explained to their technical support how they could go to the Faith Comes by Hearing website, find the files, and they're much more technically savvy than I am. So a friend of mine, Eric, found those files and was able to download them and give a presentation. And then at the national conference, he explained to everyone how they could obtain an audio Bible in their native language, either Acholi or Lango. Now, the beauty of this is that a lot of the folks don't read and write English so well. English is their second language. And their own native language, there aren't that many books. So having a Bible that you can hear that's in your native language is extremely useful. We're really hoping to get a lot of house groups out of this. I actually don't know how effective it's going to be in terms of how many people have cell phones and how many are actually going to download it and have a house group and listen, but at least we made it available to them. And then after the national conference, I was honored to attend the consecration of Bishop David. He was consecrated as bishop over all of Divine Waters. This was performed by a bishop from the United Kingdom, and it was a really wonderful ceremony that lasted the entire day. It's internationally, this position is internationally recognized. There were perhaps something like 1,000, maybe 1,500 people present for this ceremony. After that, we traveled back to Lyra, and I was asked to speak in the away church, and I really enjoyed this church. They're a very small church in a mud hut village, which is not uncommon in this part of the world. They're subsistence farmers. They have corn and goats and chickens, and so that's the way they make their living. They grow their corn and they eat what they grow, and that's how they live. This community is just starting to get some electricity. So although it was down when we arrived, they're putting in. You can see them putting in power lines coming out to this area. And so I wanted to teach on something that was more agricultural. So I selected where Jesus spoke of He is the vine and we are the branches. And this is very concrete, and I think very important for everyone to understand. That once we accept Him, He said that then we must follow His commandments. I gave the good example found in John 15, where the Lord tells the disciples, abide in me, and it's obvious that they did. And then there's a bad example found in Isaiah 5 regarding the vineyard, where Israel did not abide in God, and so they unfortunately ran into difficulties. But this was a wonderful experience. After that, then we went to the to the school. This is a school that Antioch's Calling has been involved with since its inception, back in about 2008, before they even purchased the land. We were involved, and it's really a wonderful, wonderful thing. I asked them once, what is it that you need? And they said, we need a school to send our children to. And it's also, so this is a Christian school. They're taught the Bible as well as the Ugandan curriculum, and it's run by the church. So there were 3 grants that that I went to inspect. One is improvements to the examination hall. We had to make these improvements to meet national standards so that the children could sit for the national 8th grade exam and actually get a degree for graduate, or get a certificate for graduating from primary school, which is grades 1 through 8. We wanted to build a teacher's quarters, and this was very important because it allowed teachers to live at the compound with the students. The students live here. What you're looking at in the picture here, this is where the girls live, and the boys live on the first floor on the right-hand side. So it's more like a boarding school. That the Ugandans really don't have the ability to take their children on a regular basis to and from school, so they just take them and leave them. So having the students with the children is a security issue, and it's also they don't have to pay rent in the local village anymore. Also, we paid for a wall and a fence around the property, which not only protects the children, protects all the equipment, but it also prevents roving animals from coming in and eating the crops that we're growing to feed the children. And there are a fair number of hungry pigs and goats and cows that would just love to do that. So this is the teacher's quarters that was constructed with one of our grants. I looked inside. The rooms are very simple. As of now, I don't think they have electricity, although it's coming. And when I say electricity, that's usually one bare bulb hanging in the center of the room and maybe a few outlets. But at this point, I don't think they have anything. If they cook, they're going to cook in these little alcoves off to the right. They're very small rooms, or they could use them for storage. And inside, it looks like they have just 2 bare rooms with bare walls. So it's very, very simple living conditions. For bathroom facilities, they have pit toilets off to the left. The pit toilets do not have sit-down toilets. They're just a hole in the concrete. And you may find it interesting, what's laying on the ground here. The Ugandans eat termites. They catch them when they go on their mating flight, and then they dry them, and then they make them into a paste, and they eat them. And they will last for a very long time. They're high in protein, and they are called locally white hens. I don't know why. This is part of the wall that we paid for the construction to help protect the children, the equipment, and keep out the animals. The entire facility is not surrounded by this. They found a less expensive way to provide security for another part of the facility, and they're still purchasing land. And so as they purchase land, they're not going to build a fence until they know where the boundary is going to be. You can see that we're starting to get power lines in here. What you can't see is it stops here. So it doesn't go any further. The power is not yet hooked up, but we're very hopeful. So we've lived without power for a long time. We actually purchased solar collectors for them and some batteries, and that helped quite a bit. This little window here is interesting. They're trying to make an agreement with one of the local banks to have a very small branch here so that the parents can withdraw the school fees, and then they can pay the school. And these are the desks that we bought for them. And this is to help them with the national exam, and this is in their examination hall on the 3rd floor of the school. So we talked about a number of very long-term plans. We are hopeful that Compassion International will designate this as a child development center. They have not done so as yet, but we're very hopeful. So this would be a three-part ministry in which Compassion has donors that help all the students with their books and their clothing and maybe a little extra food now and then. Antioch's Calling pays for the infrastructure, and then Divine Waters actually runs the school and pays all expenses for running the school. We're hopeful of building a new high school sometime in the future, maybe in the next 5 years we might be looking at that. Where Divine Waters is interested in purchasing more land for growing more food for the children. If we get a high school, we're probably going to be doubling the number of kids. We're going to need more food. We hope to have electricity very soon. It's coming. We need a system for catching rainwater to use so that we can flush toilets as opposed to having a hole in the ground. So you say, well, you can live with a hole in the ground. The flush toilets are nicer, believe me. Also, another alternative would be purchasing toilet cones or pedestals. It'd be nice to have a little health center with a nurse or something. That's blue sky. Currently, the facility does care for some aged children. These children were born with the disease, very unfortunately, and they have to have a special diet. But they live at the school, and the church takes care of them. This is an example of the accountability that they provide Antioch's Calling. This, for example, is the amount that they receive for us for a particular grant. This is 85 million shillings, which comes out to be about, in this particular case, it's somewhat over 20,000 US dollars. And then we have cement, iron sheets, ridges, timber, fuel, all kinds of expenses, labor for construction of the teachers' quarters and for grading of the playground. This is not complete accountability yet. They're still working on the final accountability, but it's partway there. And this is an example. They give us copies of the receipts for all of the items that they buy. So, for example, this is timber for putting up the teachers' quarters. And then the last part of the accountability, of course, is when I go over and actually inspect it, physically. Now, Divine Waters Ministries plans to complete a church at the school. Currently, they have been using the school as a church, but they want to actually have an independent building. And they decided to construct this on their own. They do a lot of work on their own without our assistance. And so they collected money and for the materials, and then organized the labor themselves and put this up. It still needs a concrete floor, but they plan to dedicate it on June 9th, which is the day of Pentecost this year. Probably about 9 o'clock in the morning. I think if they're not on Israeli time, they're close. So this is going to be a church that serves not only the school, it also serves the local community as well. And because it's a Christian school, then this meshes, very beautifully with the lessons, the education that the children are getting. Additionally, there is another church that would be very nice to help complete. This is a church that is meeting at the Divine Waters Uganda compound. This is the well drilling ministry, not to be confused with Divine Waters Ministry, which is a different organization. But anyway, they're very closely related, and so these are the group of folks that meet on the east side of the city. The Adele Church that I showed at the very beginning of the presentation meets on the west side of the city. So you can see that they have they need to finish up some of the inside of the building. I think we may need electricity. I don't know. They may have electricity at this point, but they definitely need to finish up part of the building. But the other reason they're interested in this is the well drilling ministry is funded by multiple international charities. So they are receiving funding from Canada, California, Texas. They have from the UK in the past, and of course, they're receiving funding from Antioch's Calling in New Mexico. And so they wanted a place where all of these people come periodically to do accountability, to look at the wells, to look at the facilities that they're paying to have constructed. And so they're wanting a facility to house the foreign visitors, to host the church, and also to provide a facility for teaching and for training. So this will probably be our next grant, and hopefully, I believe this is going to have flush toilets, probably a little kitchen, and seriously hope mosquito netting for when I come. So there's a number of additional things that I discussed with them when I was there, and some of these are very exciting. When I was there, Bishop David commented. He said, "You know, it would be very nice if we could learn about irrigation in northern Uganda. We have a tremendous amount of land, but we unfortunately don't know quite how to farm it properly to maximize its productivity." And I said, I don't think this is a problem because the Israeli government is kind enough to provide classes teaching people on things like irrigation and farming. So before I left, Pastor DeLeo and I looked up this organization. It's called Mashav in Israel, and they teach people in sub-Saharan Africa. They have a class on intensive vegetable production. We may be assisting them to some extent with going to this class and learning how to grow vegetables much more efficiently, and especially for the school. We want to do this. Also, as we're driving down the road, we noticed that there's a lot of mangoes that were rotting. The comment was made, well, we don't know how to preserve them. And so I'm thinking that some type of solar food drying technology, that they could construct the solar food dryers themselves. They could even teach their own people, and they could get these in the villages at all of the churches and at the school eventually. And this would dramatically increase the amount of food they have. They've requested information on training for all their members on systematic theology and also for pastoral training. This would be a degree program from a seminary university. We're looking into how to get them the information that they need to train everybody in their denomination about the Bible, about the Lord, about how to walk with the Lord, have a good relationship, so that everyone has a firm foundation, and that their pastors also have a very firm foundation, because a lot of the pastors are not trained. They requested material for training the youth how to do evangelism, and then of course I get multiple requests for all kinds of books when I go. So I'm looking at probably returning in 2021, which is a couple years from now. By then we're going to have a couple more grants that we should have completed. There should be some good progress in these areas. Mind you, a lot of the things I talked about, they're blue sky, and if we get them in the next 10 years, we're going to be lucky. I'm hoping for, because things progress slowly, I'm hoping for a couple years on the major projects. And on the pictures on the right, this is the view looking out the third floor of the primary school as you're looking southwest towards the gate. And this is the church that is just outside the wall. And I just absolutely had to get a picture of this beautiful turkey. He belongs to the pastor's wife's parents. And so I thought that he was a nice closing picture. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to contact us. We're on the web. Thank you so much. Shalom.